The Kings did what they couldn't do 2 games ago in Toronto, and that is take down the Toronto Raptors. They moved to 5-3 on the season. Very nice to not lose to the Raptors twice in one season. You don't want to get swept by the Raptors. Going 1-1 in this stretch is totally fine because in this stretch of games, the Kings haven't lost to anyone else. So you can lose one game to a bad team as long as you then come back and respond, especially on home court. It's not like last game where you're on the second night of a back-to-back. Now, of course, they didn't blow them out for most of the game, but they turned it on in the fourth quarter. I think that's kind of what they tried to do last time in Toronto, but in Toronto, they couldn't afford to do that. One, because Toronto just shot better from three, but two, because they didn't have the legs for it. I think it's much harder to just snap your fingers and turn it on in the fourth quarter when you are coming off the second night of a back-to-back. So they can't afford to do that in those situations. But look, I would rather if they never did it, but that's just not how a season goes in the NBA. But this game for the first 3 quarters was very, very similar to the game in Toronto, in which it felt like both teams were kind of a little loose with the ball. The transition play was very important. The offensive rebounding was very important. But I thought that the Kings just got outworked early. And that's really what it came down to. The Raptors were getting into the paint with such ease against the Kings. The Kings were not applying that pressure defensively. And I thought it was the worst stretch of defense from the Kings starting unit all season. Before the game, there's a stat going around that the Kings 5-man starting unit had the best defensive rating in the entire league of units that played like 30 or 40 minutes. I can't remember the exact limitation there, but they did not show that here. They were not good defensively. RJ Barrett was killing us. He went perfect in the first quarter. I think it was 6 for 6. And it was the RJ Barrett versus Keegan Murray show in that first quarter. Keegan getting kind of schooled on the defensive end by RJ Barrett because Barrett has that combination of quickness but also strength, and the Raptors were finishing really well around the rim early in this game. They were hitting their floaters. They were hitting finishes through contact. RJ Barrett very much leading the charge in terms of that. But then you had Keegan Murray on the other end, and he was just carrying the Kings offensively. Had 2 nice threes where it was just no hesitation coming around screens. And that's one thing I liked from him in this game was the no hesitations on threes. He didn't shoot amazing. He was 3 for 8. It's fine. But he never hesitated. And then the offensive rebounding. That's the big story of the game for Keegan. And his rebounding has just been the story of his entire start to this season. It's really wild how different he looks in terms of rebounding the basketball from his rookie season to last season to this season. His rookie season, he was not a good rebounder at all. And it was something that the coaching staff constantly talked about. Mike Brown constantly talked about him wanting Keegan to rebound more because he had to impact the game outside of his shooting. And he was better last season, but then he's just taken such a huge leap this season. 12 rebounds, 7 offensive rebounds. That is an insane amount of offensive rebounds. The Raptors only had 8 as a team, and it saved the Kings because the Kings didn't shoot well in this game. They shot 28.6% from 3, shot 46.7% from the field, but they just got way more possessions than the Raptors. They had 2 more field goal attempts than the Raptors. They had 17 more free throw attempts. And so while he was having a tough time on the defensive end against RJ Barrett, he was getting it all back on the offensive end. Chris Boucher also came in, was hitting threes again. I was just like, what are we supposed to do? This guy sucks shooting from beyond the arc against every other team except us. Thankfully, he did cool down. I think he hit his first 3 and then missed his next 3. I will say, I think the Kings did make an adjustment to take away the 3-point line. They were better in running 3-point shooters off the line. They still weren't going to run Chris Boucher off the line because he shouldn't be hitting these shots. But they were running Grady Dick off the line. Kevin Huerter did a good job of that, coming around screens. It forced Grady Dick to go 0 for 5. And he missed some open ones late in the game. And I think that's what happens when you make someone uncomfortable early in the game. you kind of reap the rewards of making someone uncomfortable from the 3-point line early by having them miss open ones late. They were chasing Jameson Battle off the 3-point line pretty well. And so even though their paint defense was not good, that was kind of the sacrifice. And obviously that's not something you want. It shouldn't be either they get wide open threes or they get open looks in the paint. Like that shouldn't be how it is. But you could see that that was the trade-off. They needed to be better on their rotations to come in and protect the paint. But I will say it is better to have them scoring in the paint than from the 3-point line, as long as they're not getting wide open layups every time. You force them into some floaters and shots like that around the rim. You can live with some of those because those are tougher shots and they don't have any chance of heating up from the 3-point line and totally pulling away. So as long as you're doing well offensively, you can at least keep up. And that's kind of what the Kings did all game. They just kept up offensively until that fourth quarter. Because the Kings' offense, despite not shooting all that well from deep and not shooting great overall, I liked the way that they were patient, the way that they wouldn't force things early in the shot clock. If something wasn't there, they would reset up top. They would give the ball to Fox. They would give the ball to Monk. And they would reset the possession and go again. And if something wasn't there and they have enough time, they reset again and go again, because this Raptors team was very young. And if they just kept going, they were going to find gaps or the Raptors were going to foul them. They did a great job of getting to the free throw line. That's another thing that we've seen the Kings be very successful at. And they're knocking down free throws again. It's wild how much of a difference a season makes. I mean, the Kings still leading the league in free throw percentage. They shot 87.5%, 28 for 32. It's so nice to see them being able to knock down free throws. And I think one of the things that you're seeing with the Kings relying less on the 3-point ball, which in this game, they went 10 for 35, is they are able to stick in games and give themselves more of a chance in the third quarter or in the second half, like you saw against Miami. I think that first half, the Kings just needed to be stronger with the ball, because this Raptors team, they just got a bunch of young guys that are hungry. They're going after the ball. Obviously, we know Davion Mitchell is going to do that. Ochai Agbaji, Jonathan Mogbo, Jacoby Walter, Jamal Shed, all these guys, they're just going to go after the ball. And so there were just some times where the Kings were just a little loose, like losing concentration a little bit. I was always nervous when somebody who wasn't a usual ball handler had the ball. Alex Len got stripped, obviously, but Kevin Huerter as well. I was nervous when Keon had the ball at times, just because it felt like there was always the possibility at the Raptors forcing a turnover because of their ball pressure. In that third quarter, I think you could see Fox tried to turn it on offensively like he did in Miami. He didn't exactly do the same defensively, and offensively his shot wasn't falling. Again, I didn't like some of the 3-point shots that he attempted, but he also was not finishing well inside either. He just had a very rough game offensively, but at least he knocked down 9 out of 10 free throws. So we'll take that from Fox. But yeah, a very rough shooting night from him. And because he wasn't getting inside all that much, at least not all that easily, he also wasn't finding open guys on the perimeter. And so because he tried to take over in that third, it didn't really work. Keegan cooled off from 3, and so it got a little nerve-wracking. The Kings went to a zone, and it felt like when they went to that zone, it's like they just conceded the 3-point line. So instead of this defense where, yes, you let them into the paint quite a bit, but at least they're only making 2s when they make them, so you can kind of stay in it. Now you just concede the 3-point line, and they went on a big run to actually extend the lead to a point where it was a little worrying. In the first 2 possessions that they went to zone, they allowed 3 wide open looks. One of them right in the middle of the paint. That one was missed, and then they got the offensive rebound. They got 2 wide open looks from 3. The Kings have had one good stretch of playing zone defense this entire season. The rest of it, they just allow open shots. The only time this Kings team should be going to a zone is if the other team doesn't have good shooters on the court. But when you have Grady Dick on one wing and Ochai Agbaji on the other wing, I don't think going to zone is really the solution because we can't seem to stay with other teams in a zone. We just don't look like a good enough zone team. It just looks like guys trying to focus on defending space, and so they just lose their players. At one point there were three Kings out at the 3-point line while there were 3 Raptors down low with the ball, and so they just had a 3-on-2. The awareness in this zone just does not seem good enough to me. But then the Kings were able to grind back in that third quarter, getting to the free throw line. The offense was very good in that third quarter, and they were just barely able to stay in it. They just traded buckets. They allowed 70% from the field to the Raptors in that third quarter. There was no defense. I can't remember any stops except for when Sabonis got the steal and went for the dunk, and DeRozan got a steal, and it went for a Keegan layup. Those 2 plays were huge, sparked a big Kings run, which they needed to stay in this game. And that's kind of what you can prey on with this Raptors team, because they will give you the ball sometimes. And the Kings actually were able to capitalize in transition, which wasn't their strong suit in this game. But yeah, the defense at the end of the third quarter was just so sad. The Raptors just walking around these screens so deep into the paint and getting whatever they wanted. It was really sad. I don't know why the Kings took Keon out. He barely played any minutes in that third quarter. I don't know why they took him out. We obviously needed Keon in the game there. Instead, we had Monk and Herter. Monk was atrocious. I mean, it was wild. But I wasn't quite stressing yet, at least not out of any normal levels of stress yet, because as long as the Kings came out and started the fourth quarter the right way, we were going to be fine. And that's what the Kings did. And I got to give a big shout out to Alex Len, because it really felt what the Kings were lacking throughout most of this game, but especially in that third quarter, especially late in the third quarter, was just any sort of ball pressure, just making guys uncomfortable. Because how the Kings were able to really make Miami uncomfortable and limit them to 17 points in a quarter was just make them super uncomfortable with the ball pressure, constantly swiping at the ball, because that's what the Raptors were doing. Sure, you're going to pick up some more fouls, but who cares? You allowed 39 points in a quarter. You can concede some fouls if it means you're not going to allow 39 points in a quarter again. So Alex Len applied ball pressure. He did pick up a foul in the perimeter, but at that point, I didn't care. Sometimes I would be like, why is Alex Len out on the perimeter just picking up a random foul? But in this case, I was actually very happy, because it's like somebody finally trying to make the opponent uncomfortable on the defensive end. And I think Fox also stepped up in a big way defensively in that fourth quarter, because he tried to pick it up offensively at the start of the third, but we didn't see that same defense from him. And we did at the start of the fourth quarter. And so that was a big part of the Kings' run, finally making them uncomfortable, turning them over. They weren't able to just walk into whatever shot they wanted. Fox had one possession where he locked up 3 guys and forced a miss. Monk had some big rebounds. The Kings finished possession strong with their rebounding. Alex Len was really good there. Len was blocking shots all game. He had 4 blocks. Monk finally got it going a bit in that fourth quarter. Has not had a great start to the season. Definitely not defensively, but also offensively. So he got it going a little bit there in that fourth quarter. He had a really nice feed into Len on a drive, and Len got to the free throw line. And the big boys, they woke up, right? The lineup that really did it was the Fox, Keon, DeMar, Keegan, Sabonis lineup. I thought Kevin Huerter played well in this game, but I also thought that Keon Ellis was the right move to end this game with, because you just needed someone who's going to be disruptive defensively. It did make me nervous that the Kings were having Keon Ellis initiate the offense every single possession, because I was worried about them putting pressure on him, and I thought he was going to turn the ball over, but he never did. So that's credit to him. He even made a nice play on a little oop to Alex Len once the garbage time unit came in. But the Kings just ran the same play over and over again. Keon brings it up on the right, tosses it over to Fox. Sabonis is screening for DeMar on the baseline to get DeMar to the right block. DeMar gets the ball and goes from there. Whether he just is able to fade and hit or kick it out to an open shooter. He had it going in the fourth. And I mean, that's just the beauty of having DeMar on the Kings. It it makes me so much more confident when the Kings have a lead in the fourth quarter, as long as they're getting some stops. Because I never feel like the Kings are going to have rushed possessions where they can't get anything going and they're going to turn the ball over. Because they have a reliable guy that they can go to in the post. He's going to take a bunch of time off the clock while also having very minimal chance at a turnover and very high chance at a good shot. Like, that's just the perfect recipe to maintaining a lead, because he doesn't need to hit every shot. They don't need to score on every possession. He just needs to take time away and get the team good enough looks without turning the ball over so that the other team can't run in transition, and just be putting some points on the board to maintain the lead. And in this case, it felt like the Kings scored on every possession. And it made for a very stress-free fourth. We had Keon getting a steal, getting out in transition. Finally, the Kings converting in transition. You had a Sabonis putback. You had Sabonis getting inside late in the shot clock and for some reason handing off to Fox, who then just dribbles to the corner and hits a three. I think Sabonis was protecting his field goal percentage. Didn't want to miss because he went 6 for 6 from the field. 5 for 5 from the free throw line. 100% on the game. Perfect game for him. The crowd had those light the beam chants going a little early for my liking. It was like 3 minutes to go. Like, chill out. More than 3 minutes, I think. I felt like they needed to chill out. But I did have an idea where you could have the fans in attendance voting. Like, at any point you could vote to light the beam. And when a certain threshold is reached of fans in attendance voting to light the beam just gets lit. So then, even if the game's still going, it's a blowout, we vote to light the beam. It just gets lit. Obviously a horrible idea, but I just think that's a really funny idea. I'm just glad the Kings made this very stress-free. In the fourth, solid win. Said it a lot this season, but you're not going to blow out every bad team. You're definitely not going to blow out every bad team from the very start. And so the Kings were able to just turn it on, and that's what you want to see. Sabonis had a historic game where he didn't miss a shot, whether that's from the field or the free throw line. 17 points, 13 assists, 11 rebounds, got the triple-double, 0 turnovers. So he's the first player in NBA history to not miss a shot and have the triple-double with 0 turnovers. Just really a classic Sabonis stat. Could he have shot the ball more? Probably. He was protecting that field goal percentage late. He wanted it. Come on, we know, we see you. He wanted it. But the facilitating from him was very good, except in transition. The passes were off in transition. I mean, the Kings in transition were so frustrating this game. Malik Monk especially. Monk just had an awful game in transition. I don't know what he was doing. He was just running at guys, trying to get foul calls, jumping at them, had a charge. I think he was literally 0 for 5 in transition. Not on shot attempts, but just in converting transition opportunities where he had the ball. He tried to lob to Fox. It gets blocked. Then he goes and gets a charge because he thought they would respect the lob, because that's what he tried last time. And then he just kept messing up. Every time he went to the rim, it was so bad. But Sabonis also wasn't good in, in passing in transition. But Monk was so bad in all cases going to the rim, except for that one play where he fed Alex Len. But the funny part was, 2 times when the Kings messed up in transition, where they had like a 3-on-1 and a 2-on-1, they ended up getting threes off of them. I think it was a Fox 3 and a Herter 3. So it worked out. But still, I mean, the Kings have to be better in transition. They've had one good transition game all season. I think it was against the Hawks, right? They just, they're such a bad fast break team. I hate it so much. Monk just really hasn't been able to find his way. He went 4 for 12 in this game. He hasn't been knocking down from 3. But also, he hasn't really found his way in getting to the paint and making plays there. Hasn't had the same success in the pick and roll that we've seen before. And the Kings bench just hasn't been able to score, so they need him to be better. DeRozan in this game, 27 points, continuing to be the Kings' leading scorer. 11 for 21 from the field, multiple and ones. Just continuing to be such a fun player to watch. I mean, it's just so fun to watch a guy turn around and knock down tough shots in the mid-range where you know that the other team can't do anything about it. Because he rises up and the defense has two choices. It's like you either kind of let him and he's almost certainly going to knock it down, or you try to contest and you probably foul him and he's still going to knock it down even when you foul him. He had 2 threes in this game. He also had one where his foot was just barely on the line. So when you're talking about him shooting from that range, looking very confident, went 2 for 4, had the one with his foot on the line. Also, one of his misses was a half-court heave. So if you think about it that way, it's kind of 3 for 4 from that range. So looking very good shooting from deep, because he has been a capable 3-point shooter and especially corner 3-point shooter. And so when the Kings are able to get him open, he's stepping into him and he's knocking him down. And the Kings' half-court offense just looks so good because they are able to run all the dribble handoffs, get Fox going downhill, get Herter threes, get Keegan threes off of the DHOs, and then they're also able to get DeRozan in the post. And he's looked like a capable off-ball player, but when it comes down the stretch, the Kings last season just looked so bad down the stretch in fourth quarters because they went to the isolation offense without a very good isolation score, because Fox dropped off in terms of isolation scoring last season. And it's just so nice to have a guy like DeMar to be able to pick things up. It hadn't necessarily shown in the fourth quarter numbers yet, but obviously after this game it should, having a 33-14 fourth quarter. In the Kings offense, it was 30 points, 27 points, 32 points, 33 points in all the quarters respectively. Keegan with a 22-point game. His scoring numbers haven't popped this season. His 3-point shooting, obviously being down, is a part of that. But really, he just a lot of times doesn't need to be the scorer. And it would be great if he could get back to those 3-point shooting numbers. But what he's doing on offense in other ways, whether it's his offensive rebounding, getting to the rim when the Kings need him to, those things are very important. He was going to his floater in this game, which was cool to see. And when you have Kevin Herter in that starting lineup, it just makes every single player in that starting lineup so dangerous offensively. Fox, obviously not too dangerous offensively in this one, but had 21 points. Wasn't quite as bad as the last Toronto game, I guess, just because he actually made 2 threes, but was definitely worse finishing inside. He was just a little off, but it just wasn't a game where we needed him very much. He was a big part of getting to the free throw line, which is one of the things that kept the Kings in this game. So that's great. But him being able to defer to Keegan, defer to DeRozan, and then turn it on defensively in the fourth quarter, which I think was one of the biggest reasons that the Kings had the fourth quarter that they did. That's really cool to see, because Fox can be one of the best defenders at the point of attack because of his quickness combined with his strength, combined with his quick hands. He can be one of the best defenders. And especially against young ball handlers that the Raptors have. They don't have anyone that's super confident handling the ball. The Kings should have been able to put pressure on them all game and make them super uncomfortable and force more turnovers. But Fox turned it up in that fourth quarter, and that's really what matters. Herter back from illness, which was good to see. He had some really nice takes inside, which you absolutely love to see. But the one thing that I really liked from him was the way that he was chasing around screens, and he wasn't letting shooters get open looks, and he was giving that back contest, just making sure that he's always felt on those shots, not giving up on those plays, because that's a place where I think the Kings have gotten hurt, getting stuck on those screens. And so for him to get around those screens was important. And him being able to just come out and put up 11 points, I think is a little underrated. The Kings need another guy that can do that with the way that their bench is performing right now. So those are 11 valuable points. Because then you get to the bench, it gets rough. Trey Lyles, 11 minutes. He just hasn't been playing as much as you would normally see him in the past few seasons because he's been so bad. He had 1 3-point attempt that was open that he missed, and then just didn't do that much. Had one nice moment where he ran the floor, sealed off, got the pass inside, kicked out to, I think it was a Keon 3. But other than that, he just hasn't been able to make the impact that we've been so accustomed to seeing and so reliant on from him over the past few seasons. And that's really rough because the Kings bench hasn't gotten production from other places, hasn't gotten production from Monk. Definitely not as much as we're used to. Sure, he scored 13 points in this game, but it's not the same production we saw last season. The other two guys, obviously, that coming off the bench, Keon Ellis played 23 minutes. Thought he could have played a little more in that third quarter, but then they had him playing a lot in the fourth quarter. So made a little more sense maybe why he didn't play as many minutes in the third quarter if the plan was to have him play in that fourth quarter. But he had a great all-around game. Thought he was solid offensively. I don't think he did a great job of staying in front of guys on the defensive end, but also I don't think that's always been, his biggest strength defensively. He's not Davion out there where he's always going to keep his chest in front, but he just is able to impact plays defensively. Other ways, if he gets beat, he's going to try to knock the ball away then, or he's going to recover in some crazy way by doing a 360 or something, right? And his impact defensively was definitely very big in this game. Kings needed his type of ball pressure. And then you had Alex Len, who played 14 minutes. I think him playing more than Trey Lyles says a lot with how things are going. When he was getting those DMPs, now he gets 3 more minutes than Lyles, and he was good. He rebounded the ball, blocked some shots, just did his thing. He needs to be able to knock down 2 free throws in a row. I feel like he hasn't done that in 2 seasons. But look, that's all you're going to get from Len. That's all you expect. Just be solid enough. We did see maybe 3 J-Mac minutes in non-garbage time. And Davion, he was being guarded by J-Mac, and he's like, ooh, a guy that's finally smaller than me. So Davion just went right through him and over him. And Davion had some nice drives to the rim, and the Kings could not stay in front of him. And there was no resistance at times, which was frustrating. But yeah, J-Mac just, again, not given the most opportunity to make an impact off the bench. I never like judging a guy when they play like 2 minutes, because that's just not at all enough time to get into any sort of flow. He missed his 1 3-point shot that he took in non-garbage time minutes, I think, and then he ended up going 0 for 3. Really, I think one of the bigger stories of this game was the minutes. Keegan Murray, he only played 35 minutes. That's nice for him to not have to play 40 minutes in a game, and the Kings still being able to come away with the win. And all the the most a starter played was 35 minutes. So a little more spread around. You got more bench minutes in there, despite the production still not being quite there. Just being able to have bench guys in there soaking up some minutes, I think that's important. The Kings' next game comes against the Clippers. It's another home game, and the Clippers, despite losing Paul George, being without Kawhi Leonard, they've been competitive in almost every game. I've watched a lot of the games. They're 4-4. Harden's just out there taking a whole bunch of shots, but he's orchestrating a lot of the offense, obviously. But then they're getting production from Norman Powell. They're getting production from Zubats. They're getting some production from like Amir Coffey, who went off in the second half a couple games ago for them. They got a lot of guys that are tough defensively, in Derrick Jones Jr., Terrence Mann. Off the bench, they got Amir Coffey, Chris Dunn, Kai Jones. So despite not having that same star power, they got a lot of just solid dudes on their team. I don't know what the matchups are going to be, if Keegan's going to take Harden, or I'm not sure what it's going to be. But whoever is guarding Norman Powell is probably going to be very important. I mean, whoever guards James Harden, obviously very important. You got to put ball pressure. You got to make sure they can't just walk into the lane. I mean, if the Raptors were able to just walk into the lane, imagine Harden coming off a Zubats screen, just throwing it up to Zubats or laying it in every possession. If the Kings play the same defense, that will happen. If you can limit that pick and roll, and if you can limit Norman Powell, you have a very good shot at winning this game. The Kings should be the better team, and these are big games against teams that could possibly be contending for those Western Conference spots there. But anyways, that is it for this episode of the Roll Report. As always, thank you to the members who support this channel, No Rain and Joe Mama, and I will see you guys in the next one to recap the game against the Clippers. Peace.